Hello, my name is Abel Sanchez, and today we're going to be talking about digital cats on the blockchain. I'll come back at the end of the podcast on how that connects to analog cows. But on to the application. This is an application, a pretty silly, cute, playful, successful application that within itself is not worth mentioning. However, I wanted to focus this broadcast on some wide ranging patterns that could be of tremendous consequence to the blockchain platform. As you can see here, we already saw headlines earlier this week that $1 million had been spent on buying digital cats, and there have been kitties that have been sold for over $100,000. And this is really, surprisingly, just a collectible type of application, no different than a Pokemon or a Yu-Gi-Oh, where you exchange cards. However, as I mentioned, I wanted to call out some of those patterns, underlying patterns that are of significance. The very first one is that it's a marriage, it is an additional layer onto the World Wide Web. If we think about Web 1.0, 2.0 being business and data, and 3.0 being IoT, we now have a fourth one, which would be blockchain. And in this case, you have the universality of a web client being delivering the application, and you also have a plugin with blockchain using MetaMask. The other thing that we should say about this as well is that this is the first mainstream distributed application that has been delivered onto the marketplace. News outlets everywhere you look, and media headlines, as the one I just showed you, are touting and having conversations about what these distributed digital cats are, and it's having a reach that no other application has had before. This is crossing over onto the consumer space. People are excited about it, and it's a fun application. And that could be ultimately one of the first applications that burst onto the mainstream from a platform that technically has been hard to get access to. Now, that doesn't mean that we haven't had other ones. We've had the waves of ICOs, and we've had other contracts such as plain pokers and others, but they have been in pretty specialized pockets. Now, this is a very different handshake with the end user, and it's using the blockchain, as I mentioned. And if you don't think that this is a significant component of this, think about Vitaly's Buterin's About Me page, where he describes that the way, or one of the reasons he started to envision distributed applications that were not governed by a single entity was when he was playing World of Warcraft. And he talks about crying himself to sleep when the owners of the platform made a change that removed some of the capabilities of some of his weapons. And so this is a very different type of handshake that could be made in a very different type of application that's being delivered. It happens to be delivered through a browser, but again, it has those principles of blockchain that are very, very different. The success of it when it comes to running on Ethereum is such that throughout the last week has been in place number 1 or 2. As you can see here on this screenshot, it's at number 1, and it has about 15% of all transactions on the platform, which is truly surprising. Now, to talk a little bit about the application itself, as it's interesting in its own right, you have here a screenshot of cats and their price in Ether, the crypto coin that the Ethereum platform uses. And the rules are the following. The first generation, the Genesis block or the Genesis cats, were 100. Every 15 minutes subsequent to that, a new generation of cats is born, and these can be bought, and the price that is given to them is based on the last 5 sales on the platform plus 50%. If that doesn't sell within 24 hours, the price decreases afterwards. Now, anyone can sell their cat at an auction, especially this is the type of thing that is being done if they appreciate. And you can also generate new cats by breeding. And here's where that interesting connection onto the analog world, where breeding of pets has been going on for a long time. As you might imagine, there is, or you might consider, there's also a genome that accompanies each of these cats, and they come with different whiskers, cooldown time, which is the amount of time that needs to be spent before a cat can breed again. And all of these rules have led to an ecosystem and a set of rules that has captured a wide community. Now, when it comes to The actual cat, as I mentioned before, this is a very different type of cat. This is a cat that you own yourself. If need be, or if there were to arouse enough disagreement, the community could hard fork, as has been done in other blockchain platforms. And again, this is a very different proposition to the one we've had before. The handshake, if you would, that's being made is quite different. If we consider simply games alone, imagine the impact that this could have. This is a very large industry, valued at about 100 billion this year, and you can imagine that some of these properties could make it onto this platform. So again, when it comes to reach, this is an application or an industry that has not really participated in this space before, and it could be significant when it comes to this demonstration or this demonstration of possibilities on this one silly little game. Now, it could also lead to, as you might imagine, to a whole new wave of ICO-like type investments. You can imagine that if you bought those kitties early on, for very little money, and are now, some of them are going up to 100,000, you could profit quite a bit. And so you can imagine that a lot of people that are paying attention to what's going on will have a second generation of offerings that are similar, and they could be copycats, no pun intended in this case. Now, more interestingly, in a business context, all of those rules that we just walked through are rules that are being captured in software in smart contracts, and that is something that is quite significant. You can imagine that in a very successful platform, the validity or the logic or the stability of these contracts is going to be tested. A lot of people are going to try to exploit them. And so our understanding of what works and what can be proven will be very valuable to subsequent generations of games and to the business world at large that is very interested in moving into a contract that is smart, that can be enforced and executed in a platform. So this could be of benefit to everyone, because pretty much everything that happens in our society that is important is ultimately captured in a contract. Now, going back to the title, when I mentioned how to turn, digital cats into analog cows, there's an interesting story that I invite you to follow up and read fully, and I'll give you here the summary. Nick Johnson, one of the well-recognized contributors to the Ethereum platform, was asked to review these smart contracts before they were released to the public, and as a reward to him, he was giving one CryptoKitty. Long story short, he put it on auction, and he donated the proceeds of it to a charity that gives cows to people who are in financial in poverty in the developing world, and accompanies that with some education. And the cost of providing a cow plus the education is $500. So you can imagine here how one digital cat, his auction price went for $75,000, and so that's how he turned one digital cat into 150 analog cows. In closing, I'll mention a couple things. One of them is that Vitaly has already commented on this, expressing that it shows the potential of the platform. As well, I should also mention that we are on the first steps of a very long journey. This is true with blockchain technologies in general, but this is a good case study. It is a fun one to connect to. It is very relatable. It is one that you could use to deepen your knowledge when it comes to blockchain technologies, and time will tell whether this is really a fork in the road where the first application that crosses over to the mainstream changes what is to come. So with that, I wish you good luck and enjoy learning more about blockchain